Wow, so the situation at the border at Coutts, Alberta, has escalated in a positive way. It would appear that the blockade is working. It is seems pretty effective to me so far. We were told that the Mounties were going to go in, bust up the blockade, arrest everybody, and tow all the trucks out. That hasn't happened. We saw a scene where the Mounties were walking towards, the blockade, and were walking towards all the guys, and all the truckers, sort of linked arms, and were singing "Oh Canada" and a bunch of other things and chanting. And the Mounties turned around and went back. That was a remarkable scene. So clearly what they were hoping is that they would march in there and everyone would go, oh, okay, we surrender. And they didn't do that. There wasn't a fight. There wasn't a scuffle. Nobody, nobody was shot. No guns were drawn. No fists were thrown. The truckers in Alberta have stood their ground. They maintain that they want all mandates to be lifted everywhere, but particularly in Alberta. That's where they live. That's where they're concerned with. They want, these guys, if they're unvaccinated, they can't work anymore. And you really can't do anything because Alberta's implementing a vaccine passport, despite being, to my knowledge, the most conservative province in all of Canada. Here in the United States, we associate, whether a state, in our case, is more locked down and more totalitarian or more free with kind of, okay, is it a red state or a blue state? But up in Canada, where, the colors are kind of inverted, in Commonwealth countries, typically, the Liberals are red and or the left, the Labour Party, whatever, they're usually the red ones, and the blue tends to be the center-right party, in this case, the Conservatives. But Alberta, despite being a conservative state, is still going to implement what it measures as severe as the bluest states in the U.S. And so the people there, who have much more in common, let's say, with the folks of Montana than California, I think that's safe to say. The people of Alberta have a lot more in common with their neighbors directly to the south than the folks in California or New York City. Yet their government is acting like they're a big, left-wing Democrat state. And again, forgive me, I'm trying to put this into American terms because I'm sure most people who somehow stumbled across my channel are probably a lot more familiar with America than Canada. Well, as I said, it looks like these truckers are starting to get their way, as long as along with the truckers in Ottawa. But specifically, before I get to the rest of the country, what's going on in Alberta, MLAs, which I assume stands for members of Legislature of Alberta or members of Legislative Assembly, whatever. They're the provincial level equivalent of MPs, or what we in the U.S. would call state legislators. The MLAs from the rural districts are supposedly convening after conferring with the truckers in Coutts. They're convening to consider abolishing all restrictions and all mandates in rural Alberta. Now, I don't know what that means. I don't know how you would have different rules for rural Alberta versus urban Alberta. But that's the headline. And the truckers apparently, as an act of good faith, are opening up one lane of traffic in both directions, going both north and south across the border. So people are beginning to move on the promise that all mandates in rural Alberta are to be lifted. Now, this is smart because liberating Alberta is one part of their demands. So it's smart of them to to negotiate. I assume it's a 4-lane highway, 2 northbound, 2 southbound. It's smart of them to negotiate it off one at a time, because if they're able to liberate all of Alberta by giving up 1 lane of traffic, well, then they can use the other lane as a bargaining chip to try and oust Trudeau or something like that. And I would say, this is certainly having a national impact. It's having an international impact. Saskatchewan apparently has completely scrapped its plans for a vaccine passport. So the vaccine passport is dead in Saskatchewan. Quebec, that psychotic worse than California kind of place. They were planning to have a actual tax on unvaccinated people. You were going to have to pay a special tax if you didn't get the jab because you're such a drain on society, because you didn't do as you're told, so they're going to tax you for it. That has been scrapped, and Francois Legault's justification I found quite telling, and it was quite honest. Maybe the translation was a little rough, but the story that I saw, the wording was he was concerned about the effect it would have on social cohesion, which is a nice way of saying that if you push people too far, society will break down. People will resist, and they're not going to go along with it. He recognized, as a Machiavellian with a pulse, that, hey, if I persecute this minority of people within my province to such a degree, they're going to snap at some point, and there's going to be riots in the streets, which is good. We want our leaders to recognize that. That's the way you actually get politicians to do what you want. You don't do it through voting. Voting is how you get politicians to do whatever they want when you vote for them. That's a free pass to them. If you want them to do what you want, you have to be a threat to their power. Politicians don't pay attention to their enablers. They pay attention to their disablers. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. Now, I will get back to Alberta in a minute, but the biggest news of the day is that Erin O'Toole, or as I called him during the Canadian elections, Erin the Toole, has been ousted as the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. I'm not sure if the vote of, I don't know if you'd call it a vote of no confidence, I'm not sure if this was held amongst Conservative MPs, or if they have some kind of central committee like the U.S. political parties do, which are not at all elected and are not tied to political office. But either way, the vote came down. It was 73 for removing him and 45 against removing him. So overwhelmingly, the Conservative Party has lost confidence in Erin O'Toole, and I have to say, he's been behind the ball on this. A smart guy would have capitalized on this energy and would be right out there in the thick of this, and trying to wrap himself and around this and absorb this energy of this movement. Erin O'Toole has failed to do that. I mean, he did meet with them, I guess, but I haven't seen much about it. Erin O'Toole has. And I'm not Canadian, but I use Twitter, and I have to say, Erin O'Toole, low energy guy. He's not a leader, certainly. He's not been there when people needed him. He is in no way real opposition. He's what was the team called? I think the Washington Generals to Justin Trudeau's Harlem Globetrotters. In essence, a professional loser who wouldn't know what winning looked like if it smacked him in the face, which, coincidentally, that's exactly what happened. You, the leader of the opposition, have been handed this glorious opportunity where there's a mass movement, a mass uprising against the incumbent government, against your opponent, your political opponent, and you failed to capitalize on that. So much so that your own party, which is full, largely, with spineless weasels like yourself, had to recognize that you blew this huge opportunity, and they cut you out. And so as far as I'm concerned, this is a necessary step on the way to ousting Trudeau. You got to have an effective leader of the opposition. You can't have a tool like Erin O'Toole. Preferably, if I were writing this story, the guy who would take over would be Maxime Bernier. Of course, he's no longer a member of the Conservative Party, so that's not going to happen. And even if he were, I don't think that he would. They would never allow him to become the leader of the party. Bernier is way too good on most issues to be the leader of a major political party in Canada. But hey, maybe they'll get somebody halfway decent. It's kind of like how I feel about Nigel Farage in Great Britain. The British just don't deserve Farage, and so he'll never He'll never be the prime minister. He would have never been the leader of the Tory party over there, which is why he had to leave, like Bernier, and start his own party, which was never really electorally successful, but it achieved its goals of Brexit, and hopefully Mad Max up in Canada will achieve his goals, which in the past election, I follow Viva Frei, who was running on the PPC ticket, which was Bernier's party. They were running on, hey, let's end mandates, let's end lockdowns, let's have a normal life, let's look at real science. Essentially, everything that these people are up in arms about. That's what Maxime Bernier ran on in the last election and got trounced. But hey, UKIP got trounced all the time too. They were lucky if Farage himself was even able to hold on to his seat most of the time. And a lot of times, Farage wasn't able to hold on to his own seat in Parliament. But he got the last laugh. He won. Britain's out of the European Union. And God willing, Canada will put this whole nightmare behind them in due time. I mean, the dominoes are falling very quickly. And the people in Ottawa and in Alberta, they're dug in. They have no interest in leaving. Even if the Mounties came in and forced these men out in Couts down on the border, apparently they're having trouble contracting trucking companies to come haul and tow away all of the vehicles which are forming this blockade, because either these tow truck companies are in support of the blockade, or they don't want to piss those guys off because hey, that's who I work with all the time. These are my peers. These are my colleagues. So, as I see it, the next step in this, I think, should be the overthrow of Jason Kenney as the premier of Alberta. And he's a conservative. That's his party. It's not like this is a Trudeauist that is running Alberta. It's supposedly somebody who opposes Trudeau and everything he stands for, although it's unclear how he opposes Trudeau. This guy, Jason Kenney, he called the blockade down on the border illegal, which, well, yeah, it's illegal to blockade. But, he was not at all conciliatory. He was not at all sympathetic. He has no respect for these men, and he is bound and determined to move forward with his vaccine passport system. His whole, track, trace, database, social credit system. And so hopefully these MLAs who are meeting, hopefully there's enough of them to do to Kenney what was just done to O'Toole. Canada, if we sit down here and think that we have a problem with, I guess what would be called rhinos or neocons, or, Republicans who are just generally really bad guys, which are, most Republicans. At least we have a few good ones. And I'm in Canada. I get the impression that it's much, much worse. Because it seems like none of the good conservatives in Canada have any real power. They're always backbenchers. Whereas, here in the U.S., at least in a state like where I live in Florida, we have a decent Republican who happens to be our governor. It's not like all the good Republicans are backbenchers in Congress or in the state legislature. Actually, we don't even have the term backbencher in this country that comes from parliamentary systems. But we have some decent people who have some real influence. We have people in the Senate who are, decent Republicans. We have people who are governors who are decent. But in Canada, it seems like, okay, yeah, they've got some decent MLAs and decent MPs. But the leadership is, trash through and through. And so they need to go through, and you don't have primaries in a parliamentary system, but you need to root out some of these bad folks and get some decent real fighters, people who understand that we're living in historic times, men of character, people who stand for something, unlike the folks who are there now, unlike people like Jason Kenney. Although, I should give him some credit. He does seem to stand for something. He stands for tyranny. And considering that Alberta is a more conservative, Alberta is to the right of the country. And so the Albertan Conservative Party should be to the right of the National Conservative Party in Canada, or the Federal Party, whatever you want to call it. And if the Federal Party was able to oust Sneakers O'Toole, it should be easier. It should be less of a hurdle to oust Jason Kenney and replace him with someone who is not going to trample all over people's rights as blatantly. I guarantee you, whoever they put in is still going to be bad to a certain extent. But there's no excuse why you should have somebody so terrible. Why you should have Gavin Newsom essentially governing Alberta. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.